Hello, everybody. This is Joshua Hatton with the One Nation Under Whisky podcast. I am joined today, and as always, by my good friend, my business partner, the good Mr. Jason Johnston Yellen. But I'm also joined today with my lovely, big, fat, black cat, Ichabod. Hi, Icky. He doesn't have a mic, so you can't hear him. But we can hear you, Jason. How are you?
I'm fine. Second billing to a cat. I like this. Let's hear from the cat first. Anyway, to you, Jason.
Meow. You know, it's funny that Ichabod is with me because, and we'll get to the conversation in a little bit. But earlier today I was going through our conversation with Hamish Martin, who we'll all hear from him in a little bit, and going back through the conversation. I'd forgotten on the day he had his owl with him the whole time.
He did, just in the house, another member of the family.
Right? And one of the things he said, in my owl, he's got full reign of the house. I could just imagine getting up in the morning, you go to the kitchen, you get your morning cereal, in comes the owl. That's just got to be a wild and fun way to live.
Very Harry Potter-esque. I also wondered on the day if he gets screechers from any distant family who are upset with him.
If you had to choose a wild animal to live with, what would be your wild animal of choosing?
I think some in this house already claim I am the wild animal that they choose to be with. I've become much more like my dad around dinner time, where I become very cross and short-tempered around dinner time.
Interesting.
And I'm the one in charge of dinner, so I'm not really shouting at somebody to get my dinner on the table. But as I'm making dinner, I'm getting more and more short-tempered.
As you're making dinner?
Well, if I've let it go too long and things need to happen quickly,
right,
and I need to be fed, that was always my dad. He'd come in from work just ravenous and need dinner at 5. And in later life, we found out he was actually diabetic. And so with moving blood sugar levels, it does make me wonder. Anyway, so yeah, there are some in the house who would say that about him. As somebody who lives with a wildlife ecologist, I've never in my life been allowed to dream about living with a wild animal. So I don't have an answer.
But I imagine Tamara would want, maybe not in your house, but if she had her own little family of deer to collect poop from or something.
Yeah, well, she did. She maintained a herd at Washington State University. She was in charge of 45 deer at WSU.
There you go.
But none of those lived in anybody's houses. That was that part remains frowned upon. And actually, if you got reports of people having fawns, then the wildlife police would go collect them.
Oh, interesting.
And invariably bring them to WSU for rehabilitation.
There you go. All right.
Yeah. Keeping wild animals in your house is very, very dangerous, very problematic, and I do remember, however, I grew up watching Grizzly Adams. Do you remember the bear that Grizzly Adams had? Do you remember this bear?
I wish I could say I do, but I don't, because I really enjoyed that show as a kid too.
Yeah, I think the bear was played, as you talk about Icky having his little guest appearance today. I think the bear was played by a bear called Hercules. And you would often see Hercules in other commercials or on chat shows. And I could also be conflating two different bears. I know there was also a bear in Scotland that a chap had and kept kind of essentially as a pet. But they would do the same thing. They would go into they would be in adverts. They would be on chat shows. So, yeah, the grizzly bear, If you've ever seen Grizzly Man, you'd seem like the type of person who would have seen Grizzly Man right to the end.
So two things. A, when you said that grizzly bear had been played by a particular bear, I actually thought you were going to say the bear was played by Alan Alda. But that's just where my
such range,
right?
Such range,
because he's just a classic actor of the time, right?
Him and Denholm Elliott. I feel like Denholm Elliott could have played a bear.
Denholm Elliott. Why do I know that? Why can't I picture his face?
I've got the wrong Elliott. I'm thinking of Elliott Gould. Elliott Gould, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
Denholm Elliott is actually the dean in Indiana Jones. That's Denholm Elliott.
Yes. Okay, that's right. I couldn't. His face wasn't coming to my mind. So what was your question to me?
What was my question to you? There was Alan Alda, there was the bear, there was the chat shows, Grizzly Man.
If I'd seen Grizzly Man. You know, I haven't seen Grizzly Man. It's something I've wanted to see, but I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
It's like a gruesome...
It doesn't end well. It would be like if Free Solo ended with him falling off the cliff. Spoiler alert, he doesn't. He lives to successfully scale El Capitan.
Is it as gruesome as the one with Leo DiCaprio and the... Oh, you haven't seen The Revenant?
I haven't seen it.
Was that also Alan Alda?
Reference.
I think The Bear in The Revenant was also Alan Alda.
In one of his final roles?
In one of his final roles.
Gosh, could you imagine if Hamish has taken the time to listen? But I wonder how that episode ever turned out with me. I'll just put this in my ears as I'm in the garden picking weeds, or while I'm walking up a hill, to go wild swimming. I wonder how those boys did. And then he just listens to it.
And then that would be...
What the actual fuck? What the actual fuck?
He'd been spending the past couple decades wondering if he should just boot all the technology out his house. And I think this podcast would be the nail in the coffin. It'd be the straw that broke the camel's back.
I have to say, I
Yes.
went looking for the book he recommended during the interview, the one about wild swimming, and there's a new edition of it coming out in May, I want to say. And so I'm still got that very much on the radar. I don't remember the title of it off the top of my head. I have it stored in an online bookseller's website who makes way more money than they need us to be pimping them on here. But I've got an eye on that. And then the other thing I was going to say was while we were talking to Hamish, I did keep thinking of the book The Third Plate.
Yeah.
And The Third Plate by Dan Barber.
Yeah, exactly.
And we actually received copies of that book from Matt Hoffman.
Yeah.
And we'll be having another sit down. It's been far too long. I know we just did the April Fool's extra. But actually, I'll follow up with you in that in just a second. But it's been too long since we sat down with the good Matt Hoffman and talked about all things Westland. So we're going to revisit that. So later, either in April or the beginning of May, wherever we schedule it, you will have that coming up. But the book, The Third Plate, highly recommend. I know our listeners, and it really is quite touching when I see it happening, but I know our listeners do follow up on various book recommendations and some movie recommendations, and they do try things on for themselves. So The Third Plate is well worth your time. It's just beautifully written. It's one of those books that's kind of annoying because you've got this professional chef who's very well regarded in his industry, who then writes an absolutely impeccable text. And you're like, that's not fair. You should have one exemplary talent, not two. You shouldn't be able to both cook and write this well.
Yeah, right?
But it is jolly good.
And that's how so many people in acting feel about the triple threats, right? The ones that can sing, dance, and act. Like, you shouldn't have all of these talents, but some people do.
Mine currently is celebrities who have their careers and then launch tequila brands. That's the new double threat. And I'm like, that doesn't seem fair. Come on. You're that handsome or you're that beautiful and you've made all that money and you have a tequila brand? Like, come on. Sit down. Leave some for the rest of us.
We could go the other way. We could start an acting career, Jason.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Boom.
If this podcast has shown anything, it's that I can act interested almost all the time.
Well, speaking of which, I'll tell you, man, going back to this conversation with Hamish. Yes, go ahead. Stop me, please.
The one thing I wanted to circle back on from a second ago
Yeah.
was a follow-up to an extra. Talk about
yes.
synergy.
Yes,
Gosh,
please.
using One Nation Under Whiskey to follow up on Extra. That is some synergistic blah-de-blah buzzword insert here. So the April 1st did happen. The 24-hour auction did happen. The auction website wasn't ideal. For those of us who are maybe used to bidding on whiskies, this was much more of a straightforward, no two ways about it, make a bid, move on with the rest of your life. And so we don't know the final numbers on the bottles, but Westland are going to make an announcement letting the general public know how much was raised. And right now our kind of ballpark understanding, and I hope this doesn't take away anything from the actual announcement, but it looks like it might be around $13,000, $14,000, something like that. Given where bottle prices were before the auction closed and how much farther they could have gone, there was no add-ons. Any listeners who are used to auction sites will know that oftentimes there's software that doesn't allow sniping.
Yeah.
So if you place a bid in the last second, the auction gets extended 5 minutes. And so there's always room to get in a final bid. This auction did not have that. It actually had a hard end date and a hard end time.
At midnight, right?
And so I know bottles didn't go too much farther beyond where they were sitting, but it looks like about $13,000, $14,000 raised for Big Table,
That's
which
awesome.
for an April Fool's, which is a day I'm not particularly fond of, I think is I think it's run its course. I thought they did something really fantastic and really remarkable with those April 1st efforts with the inheritance.
It's absolutely wonderful. Like let's say your number is correct. Let's round up to 15,000. That's on average $600 per bottle. That's pretty damn good. And so a lot of people out there being generous with their money, Westland being generous with their whiskey to raise money for a very good cause. It's really admirable, and it was nice that they could have a good bit of fun while doing good work. Yeah, it was exciting.
Yeah, kudos to them.
I didn't win a bottle. Did you win a bottle?
Me neither. We do have friends. In fact, our very own dear Jess won a bottle. I will say no more than that. It is not my place to speak out of school. But yeah, she did. And then very dear friends who, I don't know if they want to remain anonymous or not. I'm not going to share their business. But they know who they are. And they also won. Mm-hmm. And so kudos to them as well. And then we also have very dear friends who were sniped at the last second. And they have had much more difficult weekends. But so many of our friends got in on this and had a ton of enthusiasm around it. So,
yeah. The ones that I were looking at, there were 3 casks that were Pinot de Charon casks, and I feel as if I kept on talking about the Pinot de Charon casks in the podcast, and wouldn't you know it, those were the ones that seemed to go for a bit higher than some of the others. So I don't know if there is a correlation there. I just know from now on, I'm going to either not speak my mind or just lie a lot.
I've done the exact same thing with Kilchoman Anticipation. I've talked about my love of it, Jared Card's love of it, Travis Williams' love of it.
My love of it?
If you look at Kilchoman in auctions, invariably Anticipation is now the highest priced bottle. Yeah, of course it is. And I said the same thing as you. I'm sure I've got nothing to do with this. However, I will be keeping my mouth shut going forward. And then I know that I won't because, Christ, I talk for a living. So, yes. Anyway, with the synergy neatly, tidily put to bed, let's bring the focus back to our dear Hamish, who will be the focus of today's episode. I have a question for you on behalf of our listeners. is if someone is seeing the masthead or someone has seen this pop up in their subscription, they might be wondering, why are we talking to Hamish the gin guy? And so how did this come about, Joshua? Because this was you, and you put it in front of me, and I went along with it wholeheartedly at your recommendation. But how did this come about?
In April 2019, Sam and Chris over at Impex put together a trip for all of the Impex sales reps. And at that time, we had been in conversations with Hamish and the people at the gin distillery with the idea that maybe we can work together, maybe we can start importing them. And you know, Sam is tight with some of the people there, right? There's long relationships, right? And so I said, okay, we're going to be in Scotland, we're going to be near Edinburgh, let's go and check it out. And so we all went to the distillery, and I'll just put it out there, right? The garden is gorgeous. The distillery is very cool. The drying room is stunning. We had a delicious lunch. I had a lovely tea. It was a beautiful day. Blah, 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 blah. Hamish Martin. Holy cow. He's one of these guys, and I told you, he's one of these guys that he felt like the Steve Jobs of gin, right? He's one of these personalities that, he's incredibly charismatic. He's wonderfully passionate about plants, about the earth, about botany, and it was infectious. And part of what made going around the garden so wonderful was him. He refuses to walk on the ground with shoes on. Like he needs to be close to the earth. And you'd say, okay, this guy's just putting on a show, and you know, he's a salesman and so on and so forth. No, he's just a guy who loves the earth and loves working with the earth and with plants and what it can be done and how it can make our lives a better life if we look after ourselves and we look after the earth. And like, right, I'm starting to regurgitate some of the things he said, but he really stuck with me. And I was incredibly moved by him and by his passion and by the processes that he explained in making these gins. And you know me, like you, I don't get excited about gin, just like I don't get excited about, you know, other non-aged spirits, mezcal and other agaves aside. But what he's creating is really quite different than anything else on the market, and it's one of those things that you can't fully understand unless you taste it. But I made a gin and tonic with Haida today with the Damask Rose, not the Damask Rose, the Damask Rose and Juniper, and Damask Rose and Juniper gin, and it was glorious. I made it for Haida. The gin was gold. You add tonic to it, it becomes pink. That's all natural. You hear it in the conversation. But I made her the gin and tonic, and she sipped it, and she said, "This is just summer in a glass. It's perfect. It's great." And it just goes to show you that his passion for plants is so incredibly evident in the gins that he makes.
And that's why I made the allusion to the third plate. In hearing from you after that trip about how engaging he is and how warm and welcoming, but then also how passionate he is, it's not a guy with a gin brand looking to market it with a bunch of stories. The way, you know, Dan Barber, the chef, has a restaurant, but he's not out there leading the chefy part, the restaurant part up front. He's leading the plants and the earth and the future, and is more than happy to talk about other people doing these types of endeavors with plants. And that was really my takeaway from Hamish, was we spoke with a human being for
Yes.
an hour, however long it was. I wasn't watching the clock. It was just with a human being who was passionate about the world around him. And that's infectious. Absolutely infectious.
He reminded me quite a lot. Though the person that I'm about to mention, I don't think can talk as eloquently as Hamish does. And I say this, he's one of my oldest and dearest friends. My buddy Al Femiak, Uncle Al, who we also mentioned in the conversation, the two very similar people that have this connection to the earth, that if they can't cut the umbilical cord, right? And if that's threatened, all hell will break loose. Like, that's what keeps Al sane. And that's what keeps the earth, plants, that's what keeps Hamish sane. And I think that's one of the things that made me connect with Hamish as well, because I saw so much of my buddy Uncle Al in Hamish. Mm-hmm. You know? Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's probably enough from us for the moment. We should probably bring in this wonderful human being.
Let's do it. Firstly, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you taking out the time to do that. As you likely know, the name of the podcast is called One Nation Under Whiskey. So we are, in fact, a whiskey podcast. However, we've taken some detours. We've talked about rum. We've talked about mezcal. We've even interviewed actors and comedians and musicians, all sort of based, trying to stay within the rubric of spirits, or connecting it back to whiskey in some way, or the passion within spirits. And so I imagine there's many of our listeners who are whiskey focused that don't necessarily know your name and don't necessarily know your gins. So I wonder if you could just give us a brief introduction of yourself and sort of your life up until you starting. Well, I guess up until now, what was your spark within spirits? How did you?
Okay. Yeah.
How did you get to gin, and did it start with gin?
I'm glad. This could take a while, but I'll try and do it quickly. It's actually really good how you started with whiskey, because I'm going to just take you right back. My father used to be production director of the old DCL, Diageo, Guinness. He actually pushed through the definition of Scotch whisky through Parliament. So you wouldn't have the definition of Scotch whisky if it wasn't for him. He got an OBE for his commitment to quality of Scotch. He started the Keepers of the Quake right at the very beginning with Lord Macfarlane. And he also started the International Brewing and Distilling School at Heriot-Watt. So I have spent my whole life with whiskey. I had holidays when I would work in bottling plants, Port and Das, so I had my whole sort of education in it from a very, very young age, always been surrounded by it. Trying to do this very quickly for you. I know I don't sound it. I'm 100% Scot. I actually you can't see, but obviously I wear my kilt full time, which makes it a bit awkward sledging if other people are about at the moment, because we've got a lot of snow. So I'm 100% Scot through and through on both sides. I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of actually Scotch whisky and everything it does for Scotland. And very quickly, straight from university, a long time ago, I went into the army, but I tore my knee ligaments very, very early on in there and was medically discharged and was left at that point, can't be in the army. And I used to play a lot of rugby for Scotland schools and 21s and all that. It was like, well, what am I going to do? And I had a passion for wine at that stage, funny enough, Joshua. And my father retired in 1991 as production director of Guinness or whatever, the Diageo now, and could see that I was wanting to get in the wine trade. And I'd started up on my own in London at that point, selling wine to restaurants. And my father said to me, well, listen, why don't we make a Scotch whisky? So actually, we produce something called Inverarity. Some of your drinkers might have had it in the past. We produced Inverarity as a single malt and as a blended whiskey. In fact, actually, Deloche Vineyards were our UK importers at one point. And so I've really built Inverarity vaults up with whiskey, but as a wine company in Scotland. And my father, unfortunately, passed away maybe, I think, 16, 17 years ago. And I carried on with Inverarity. But the reality was that I was in the wine trade. I'd built up at that stage the largest independent wine merchants in Scotland, supplying all the Michelin-starred restaurants. And we did a lot of own label work with the whiskey. So we did everything from Hollywood Palace to the Ritz, the Savoy. We did the Scottish Parliament, etc. I came a bit disillusioned with wine and growing the business. And I've always been passionate about plants, about growing the grapes that made the wine, about being involved with nature. But I didn't realize this. I'm probably giving you too much information, actually. But
no, this is fascinating. Keep going, Hamish.
Okay. Yeah. So really, from my perspective, I didn't want to ever live life, and I don't think any of us should, by going, well, I wish I did, or what if? My real passion changed from the grape to herbs and gardens and plants and nature. And I left everything that I knew. I sold Inverarity, 12 years ago now, and retrained as a herbologist. I went to the Botanic Gardens in Edinburgh, studied for 2 years with them. But actually, probably more interesting, I spent quite a lot of time in North America, actually, with, I suppose you'd call him a medicine man called Wolf. And that really changed my whole perspective on how to work with plants, how to work with nature. I worked with plants as a herbal medicine, but to work with nature as a relationship was eye-opening. I also worked with a witch doctor in South Africa. Went over to them, and really, when you sit at the feet of somebody who's truly connected to nature, you learn to shut up and listen. You know, it's not for books, it's not for writing, it's not for words. You take it internally and you get rid of your ego, and you realize there's the strongest relationship there that has to be earned, a respect that needs to be earned. And that really started my whole journey. I had no idea where it was going to take me. I just knew my rest of my life had to be with plants and with herbs specifically. And when I was living in Edinburgh, we were renting a flat at the time in the centre of town. I found a property just outside Edinburgh, a cottage where I went to have a look at it. It wasn't right. But as I drove up this single track road, I saw this huge derelict glass house. And I parked the car, jumped out, and stood in front of this glass house. Now, I'm going to use the word weeds. My real passion is indigenous wild plants. That's what I'm passionate about. So when I looked down this glass house, smashed glass, concave roofs, filled with wild indigenous plants that most people wouldn't want, I had a dream, or a deja vu of my dream the night before in its entirety, with the vines, the peaches, the paths. And I thought, right, guys, I hear you, I get it. And I gave my number to the next door neighbour, and literally 9 months later on, we get the keys to this 7.5 acre derelict plot on the outskirts of Edinburgh. I do remember I had 3 kids at the time and with Libs, and I said, there's good news and bad news, guys. Good news is I found somewhere to live. Bad news is there's no house. So welcome to a static caravan living. We lived in a static caravan for 3 years ended up being 4 kids, 5 dogs, a cat actually. And we spent 2 years to open this garden called the Secret Herb Garden. Our only objective to open this garden was to create a green space where people could come and feel the energy of the plants, feel relaxed. I mean, Josh, you've been to the gardens. I know you've got some idea about what that type of energy is that we've always tried to create.
Indeed.
And my wife just wanted to have a cafe and sell vintage furniture, and I just wanted to sell herbs. And to the fact that we sell over 600 different varieties of herbs. But we then built a house on site, 3 years later on, and you got a mortgage. And it was like, oh my God, we got a mortgage. How do you know? You have to sell a lot of herbs and a lot of cups of coffee to pay for a mortgage. And as a herbalist and somebody who adores plants, I'm a great believer. You've got to experiment. I always say there is limitless possibilities with limitless imagination. And I had created this. I still had a 3-litre still. So for 2 reasons. One, I've known about distilling since I was a boy. And 2, I was distilling actually herbal extracts to make tinctures and everything else. I was distilling plant material. And at that point, we had the largest grow the largest amount of apothecary roses in the UK. And I've been playing with those, and I ended up making a gin from them that turned pink when you added tonic, and it tasted of the roses completely naturally. Colour came from the petals, the rose flavour was coming from it because I distilled the roses separately, and we just drank it at home for a laugh. And when we ended up getting a mortgage, it was Libs was saying, Hamish, you're going to have to make a business with this gin. I was going, oh no, I don't want to go back to the booze trade. I spent my whole life in it. And then I suddenly realised I'm not actually in the booze trade at all, though I'm making gin. I'm telling everybody how amazing nature is by the botanics that go into it. So I felt completely comfortable to say, do you know what? Let's do it. We had no money, but I managed to get some investors, and we converted the barn into an ATEX-rated still room, and we produced our first gin, I think, in October 2017. We launched with the rose and the lavender. And my daughter at that stage was 17, started the business with me, who now runs all the social media and everything. And that was it. We started making gin in 2017. We hand harvest. So from my perspective, it's all about the plants that make it, not the still, not the water, not the wood. This is nature that creates it. We use no chemicals here whatsoever. As a gin distillery, we employ in the height of summer 5 full-time gardeners, 2 full-time harvesters. So this isn't like a gin distillery that says, oh, this is what we do. You actually come and see us. You can come and see the gardens and come and see what we do. So we're actually doing it for real. And it was a godsend that we did it, to be honest with you, because if we hadn't done it, I don't think we would have survived, to be honest with you. So it was really all due to the rose. So we built a big apothecary rose garden. So I call it to the homage of the rose. It's sort of, it was the plants that saved the day. Nothing to do with me, nothing to do with Libs. Actually, the plants, and specifically the apothecary rose, said, look, guys, I can help you here. I can make you a unique product which has no chemicals, changes colours, and a bit of fun. And it says how amazing the botanics are. So that, in a very long-winded way, sorry guys, brings you up to speed to where we are.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, that was brilliant, Hamish, and I really like how you put it. That it was the plants that saved the day, and it's the plants that are giving you a livelihood and feeding your wife and children and dogs and cat and owl.
Totally.
And so forth. But if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to back up a little bit. What was it about the plants that turned you on so much, that attracted you to going down that route?
That's a really good question. I think I wanted to get to know that answer too at the outset, and it's not until you go backwards in your own life and try to sort of, because we're all so busy looking forward. Sometimes it's nice to take a little bit of time out to reflect on where you've ended up being and why. Subconsciously, I realized that from a very young age, my old man was inspirational. He would, we would go out. We lived at the foot of the Pentlands, and funny enough and ironically, I'm looking at them now. I still live here, and we would go out in all weather, camping. I was very lucky to go to a school outside Edinburgh as well, but we boarded there. But any opportunity, I'd be running. I'd run up the hills. I'm addicted to wild swimming, and I had a very small piece of land when I was 20, and I can't tell you the joy of having a very small piece of land and to start to get my hands in the soil, to start working it, to start creating and seeing Mother Nature and all her beauty. And it was that sort of detail that I got. I'd been running, I used to do a lot of hill runs and be out there, and I still go wild swimming. I go wild swimming from March to September up here every morning at 5:30 or 5. I'm up in the Pentlands.
Good grief!
I'm addicted to it, and any time I see water, I'm in water. So there's this deep connection that I never really made that link until you realise that actually, most of my life I've been, and once I bought that soil when I was 20, I never stopped growing. I'd grow vegetables for people for fun. I know I had a business, and grow them and enter competitions. And I just wished, not wanted, my whole life to revolve around plants, specifically herbs. And I didn't realise that actually most of my life had been built around nature. I bought my first cottage in the middle of nowhere, so I could be in the middle of nowhere. And I suppose that's it. And then making that decision that actually I need to do something that can communicate how beautiful she is. So from my perspective, I can get people here who are passionate gardeners and completely explode their brains by saying, well, sorry, but there are no chemicals here. These plants, so when I do talks about botanics and plants, I ask people, what plants do you not like that you would call your enemy, which breaks my heart anyway. And, if they're a good bunch, they'll know lots of plants, say there's 12, 13, and I'll just spend my whole talk taking each one of those plants and flipping on its head and saying, what a gift you have by it growing in your garden. And that's how I see it, is that, yes, we're making gin, yeah, but we're growing the botanics, and at every opportunity I can tell a mixologist, we have some of the best bartenders who come out here, and the excitement when they can see that they can pick, I'll go with them, any plants, make any gins that they like. We have, I would say, well over 200 varieties of plants that work well in gin here. So you can imagine the possibilities of what we can actually create here is enormous. So trying to get back to your question, it wasn't until I realized to be brave enough to make that decision to spend the rest of my life with something, but turn my back on everything that I had known. And I won't say that wasn't comfortable. That was 3 years of wholly uncomfortable, not knowing where I was going, trying to work out how to earn a living and follow a path that I felt was true to me. And, nature has a way of communicating. Sometimes I need it to bang like a drum, but other times she's so subtle, but you just have to be awake to the subtlety of how those messages are given to you. And I know that might sound a bit odd. It probably sounded a bit odd when I'm saying it out loud, but I know it to be true to me. That once you form a connection and see the beauty, and I tell kids all the time, I know you're going to want to, travel the world and see, whether it be Niagara Falls or the highest mountains, but we forget what beauty is growing at our very feet in plants that are actually there the whole time, saying hello to you, knowing the piece of earth that you're from. You can spend a lifetime getting to know a small piece of earth. Anyway, I digress. Yeah. Sorry, I get going. I get going, and I can't see your faces to know whether they're saying "Shut up, Hamish."
No, not in the slightest.
Go ahead, Jason.
I did have a question for you though, because in listening to you, obviously, I hear the passion, and I love the passion, and Joshua and I bring passion to what we do with Single Cask Nation and whiskey and so forth. But I also, from a moment ago when you said, we got a mortgage, and we realized we really had to run a business if we were going to have a roof over our heads. But now, in listening to you, you sound a little bit like a hippie, and I don't mean that in any negative way. Do you have an internal conflict between the business side and the being one with nature side? What does that look like?
Well, that's again that's a brilliant question, because yes, there is a conflict, an absolute conflict. But then I'm a great believer in life being about a balance. That I don't ever believe that one side of the scale, whatever you're weighing up, is right. Life is there between two, and so for me, I've got 5 kids, everything else. I have to make a living, but I'm lucky enough to be making a living and doing what I believe is important to do. But in saying that about building, maybe I'm a salesman, I don't know, but my perspective of what I'm selling is selling how beautiful nature is without chemicals, and for farmers to learn as well. But the conflict I have on a personal level is sitting on a computer. I'm sitting outside now. I know I showed you it. So, I feed all the wild birds, and literally there must be 50, 60 birds outside my window at this present time. And I feed them right on my windowsill. I've got my owl in with me now. I'm still always connected. It's so important for me to be rooted. Every day, even yesterday, I went and did some potting on, though I only had an hour. I got my hands dirty. I get up early every morning. I find winter a brilliant time of that recuperation and replanning and everything else. But come March, the 21st of March, the spring solstice, I'm up every morning. I have my hour and a half to myself. I'm in water. I'm in the middle of nowhere. And that is my connection period. In winter, I try and rest. I don't worry about lying in. We've got young kids, you never lie in. All of that. And, we're moving the business to onto another level. We've got it to where it is now. I think we employ 24 people, within the whole distillery. We do an own label, a joint co-branding with Fortnum & Masons, Harvey Nicks. I do joint branding with M&S. Our story is one of real product and real authenticity. And to make that next move, this is again probably too much information, but we've got a new MD that's going to come on board in 1st of April. He's already picking up the mantle now, and that's quite a I think for a lot of people that involved in creating their own business to be able to say, okay, guys, I'm stepping back. I'm stepping back from the bit of the business that actually, I have to really force myself to do the getting up, doing the sales and doing to be able to say, look, let me do what I do best. And I do best working with the plants, growing them, selling them, working with them, coming up with ideas for the gins, and doing this, speaking to you and telling you how I feel about them. That's what I do best. And so therefore that connection, I work quite hard at making sure that I'm connected during winter with nature. I really do. And then in the summer, it's so much easier. So it's always there, but it's something I'm always aware of. It's like a relationship that it's pretty much like your oxygen to breathe. You start to not breathe if you disconnect yourself for too long. So for me, it's in every process. It's and again, you might think I'm hippie, but I'm not. I wear boots, and although I've got my kilt on, it's the beauty in the small things. Planting the seeds, and I don't know. I'm hoping that's answered your question. There is a conflict, yes, but I try to resolve it every day, every living hour, and every minute. So my office is not like a normal office. I've got 2 dogs actually in here at the moment, and an owl, and the birds outside. So,
I'm curious, Hamish, and this might be just a quick throwaway question, but in listening to you and talking about that communing with nature and being among it and taking energy from it, should I assume that you've read Nan Shepherd, The Living Mountain?
Yes, I love that book. I think if you read that book, I don't know if any of your listeners have read that. Yes. So I look at it as that. She sometimes takes it to a male-female extent. For me, it's both. There is both energies are there, and there is that connection. And she writes beautifully about it, absolutely beautifully in her perspective, her eyes. And so yes, and of course she was from the Cairngorm Mountains, so she knew those inside out.
Yeah, the reason I ask is oftentimes we'll mention books in passing on the podcast, and then our listeners will go and buy them, and then they'll write in and say, oh, I read such and such, you mentioned it on the podcast. And so I wanted to make sure that The Living Mountain was on radars within the podcast and endorsed by Hamish. So
definitely. Well, if I can add one book into that as well.
Please.
It's called Waterlogged by Roger Deacon. Unfortunately, he died quite early on. But as I said to you, I'm addicted to wild swimming, and Not wild swimming with a wetsuit, I hasten to add. I wild swim with make sure, too much information for your listeners, but let's just put it this way. There cannot be anybody nearby when I go swimming, because it's part of that connection that's so important, the flesh and the water. Roger Deacon's Waterlogged is an awe-inspiring book that will get any of your readers to think, well, actually, there's a river there. Obviously, we need to be respectful. And I might just give it a dip and see how that feels.
Oh, it's fantastic. I've got it on my web browser right now. I'm looking at Waterlog by Roger Deacon. So fantastic. I will check that out.
It's written poetry, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
It's amazing. It reminds me of growing up. Me and an old friend of mine, Jason. You've met him before, Al Femiak. We all call him Uncle Al. Mm-hmm. And in high school, when school was out and the summer was upon us, not a day went by that we didn't walk a good 2 miles to a somewhat hidden swimming hole. And there'd be all sorts of rocks and points to jump into that swimming hole, and that is what made us feel whole, being able to just get in that water every day.
Definitely. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I've been doing to my kids since they were, and still do, even in the summer, they would have cold baths. You just need. My oldest one's now 23, but I'm glad to say that they will go swimming. Even my daughter's boyfriend, who took a picture last week breaking the ice to get into. I nearly killed him, actually. That's another story. I took him wild swimming up north with my kids, and they're used to it. And I said to him, "Look, turn back now. I don't want you, risky." He said, "No, I'm fine." No, he wasn't. We had to swim. We had to rescue swim him back. But
I had to impress your girlfriend's dad, though.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't a great start.
I nearly died for you, babe.
So I couldn't believe it when I saw a picture of him breaking the ice to go in the water. And I mean, I've taken the kids, my idea of a holiday for them has been traveling the UK, finding these, doing a bit of research, finding these wild swimming holes and traveling to them and camping out. I took the 3 older ones up for, a wild camp in summer, doing exactly that. So yeah, you hope. And I think at some point they know that when things get tough, there's always somewhere to go. There's a safety blanket there that's ready for you. And I think if I could only install that in them, to know that actually nature's there to be communed with and is there for you. And when you're, I think we all find solace in it. And I think that's the reality of it.
Just thinking of internal struggles, and like Jason's previous question where he thought it may be a throwaway question, maybe this one is too. I don't think Jason's was, and maybe if I'm lucky, this one won't be either. But a lot of the discussion has been around nature and communing with it and connecting with it, and my gut tells me connecting with it as it is, as we find it. But when making gin, you're taking nature and you are manipulating it. What are your thoughts there with manipulation of that nature for a product where in the end, I mean, alcohol in a way is a poison, but it's also pleasurable. And your gins, of course, bring amazing flavor. I want to talk a little bit of the technical end of that later, but what are your thoughts around the manipulation of nature?
Yeah, so Joshua, I think a couple of things there. You'll need to remind me to come back to that. There's 2 things there. One is the word manipulation is, I think in this whole thing, I've been manipulated to make sure, I know this is going to sound very odd, to make sure the message is there. At no point have I sat down to decide on a business plan. At no point did I think, this is how we're going to make our money. At no point did I think, I need to do this for me. It's never been that direction. The direction has always been, what am I able to do to help? And my question is, show me the way. Show me what I can do to help. So it was really, I've been manipulated in a beautiful way. The gins that we do, I think you've got the lemon verbena, I think it's the apothecary rose and the damask rose. I think you've got the damask rose as well, which we grow. Is this whole aspect of not thinking. So the only way I can work with them is actually turning my thinking brain off and allowing them to do the work for me, telling me what works. So yes, we make gin, but if you think about it, on the second point to that is, if you think in herbal medicine ways, and how I came to the gin isn't because I wanted to make a gin as a marketing thing. I'm making tinctures. Tinctures are as old as the human race is. We've been working with how to extract plant material into... Alcohol just happens to be a fantastic way of extracting certain plant chemicals. Fact.
Sure.
Water is also a fantastic way of extracting plant chemicals. We actually use both of those methods to help make our gin, but I can talk about that later on. So basically, the fact that I'm making a gin is actually I know we're not allowed because modern science doesn't like you telling you that you get your medicine from your back door and all of that sort of stuff. Once again, it's a balance. Modern medicine is 90% plant extracts. When we work with herbalism, you're taking the whole plant into your body, and you're allowing your body, which is infinitely intelligent, to pick out those chemicals that your body actually needs. So I'm trying to get back to the manipulation. I think I've been probably manipulated in a way that helps me to communicate how best to work with plants, and when you came to the garden, we have all these wild corridors. So I invite nature in the whole time. We've got 12 beehives. There's no chemicals. This is, I know, again, I tell kids about who wants a friend that takes from you all the time. Modern agriculture is a monocultural, abusive relationship where it takes. Now, that's not friendship. A loving friendship is one of giving and taking, loving and receiving that love too. And so what I work really hard here on the land is to show that is possible, to make a living on a 7.5 acre plot that employs 24 people for the distillery, and in the height of summer, 18 people in a cafe. And we're growing all the we have a veg garden that no chemicals. We have a full-time, I haven't even told you that, we have a full-time guy that's all he does is grow the veg, and in summer is 1.5. And that veg and salad and everything goes to the cafe. It compounds the story of it's a balance, and it's a relationship where I'm giving as much as I can give back. And she gives her bounty back in a way that's, in my opinion, how farming should be, a balance. So, in summary, I am manipulated, but I'm producing a product that is time-honoured by what we've been working with plants before pharmaceutical business came along. And in fact, I think 50% of the world population, still works with plants naturally rather than... and all I was doing was playing with plants and experimenting with them to let them have a voice to see which direction we should go. And it wasn't part of the plan. I mean, I make herbal teas. If you have a look at our website, I think it's, the All Curiosity Distillery, our new, we're actually a secret garden gin and a secret garden distillery. But if you have a look at our website, I hand harvest and we grow our own fresh herbal teas, which are our own, hand-picked tea, obviously all dried. We do soaps that we use our botanics in. We've got, we sell our own honey. So it's not. I'm not just using the gin. The gin just happens to be the main vehicle to actually allow us to employ the people that we do employ, and to enables me to say to as many people. It's a much bigger audience now that I can speak to.
Yeah.
Well, tea will be getting ordered as soon as this interview concludes, so thank you for that, Hamish. Both Joshua and I talk about tea on the podcast as well, and so I don't want to go down that path right. Well, fuck it, I do. Talk to us about tea. Talk to us about growing that. And you're doing herbal teas, so instead of, say, black teas, green teas, or white teas, you're doing mint, rose, hibiscus. Is that the type of thing?
Yeah, so basically, if you have a look, when we set the secret herb garden up, And I was growing these plants to make herbal tea. It gained, as a way of another income stream, but another way of working with the plants. So, we used the damask. You've got the apothecary rose. We've got a lot of lemon verbena. So, we've been growing these to make herbal teas. And I was making them as herbal medicine. But I think what's more important, actually, is this whole message about why we got the damask and apothecary rose. And how did that relationship come? And I think this weaves into the tea idea, is that before we opened, I am a great believer, if you want to know the truth, go to the source. And one of the best well-known, world-renowned herbal growers and nurseries in the world is a lady called Jekka McVicker. She's written more books and everything else. And I won't go into but I ended up, writing to her, going down, working with her, and gaining knowledge. She's organic, but she's organic with the press of a button and a computer. And I love what she does, but she's different to me. I'm not organic because I use nothing. Definitely not a computer, as you can work out by the start of this conversation. But I remember saying to Jekka, I said, Jekka, why have you got no roses in your garden? She says, well, I can't have roses because they attract aphids. Oh my goodness, did that feel like a heavy weight to me, and sat so ill with me that when I got back to the garden here, and I thought, you know what? A garden without a rose is like a body without a soul, in my opinion. And so I made it a fact. And as herbalists, we only use apothecary rose and the damask rose. And I planted as many. I worked with a nursery that rooted them, and I grew as many for no known reason, apart from the fact that I thought, well, sod it. I want as many aphids because then I would like as many ladybirds and everybody else. Because who am I to be so arrogant to say that actually I'm cutting that out of this circle of life because I don't want aphids? Well, guess what? They're part of the whole chain of that connectivity. So I came and I grew shitloads. And we've got more now to the fact that, we've got more than anywhere in the UK. So, but I grew them, and I grew them then to dry them to make herbal tea. So if you came to the cafe, you could have chosen, 15, 20 different herbal teas, all grown, hand harvested, no chemicals, so pure in their flavor. And our drying room is, I don't want to boast, but it's amazing. It's, so it's at 37 degrees, same as your body temperature, same as a beehive, dehumidifier. You're bringing these plant material in such perfect condition that they dry literally within 12 hours,
Okay.
And they're full leaf. So there's none of these, what I call the floor scrapings of everything crunched up into one. It's full leaf tea that we do. But I also do a Ceylon tea, a black tea that's ethically sourced. But I do that with a tea blender in Edinburgh called Pico Tea. And we're actually, funny enough, use our gin botanics. So we've made 3 teas. We've made the rose tea with our rose petals, juniper, angelica, coriander, winter savory, mixed into the tea blend. And we've done it with the lavender, and we've done it with the lemon verbena as well. So it was just another way of me being manipulated, of delivering it. And herbal tea, again, is another way of allowing your body to pull the chemical compounds from the plants in a really beautiful, soft, gentle way.
Well, I have to say, as if this pandemic didn't have me, experiencing cabin fever and going stir crazy, I so desperately want to jump on a plane and come visit all of this, Hamish. I want to see all of this and experience all of this.
Well, there's an invitation.
Thank you.
I would love to. If there's one thing I do love doing, it is sharing. Joshua and I do love sharing it. And sharing the garden with as many people. So our gardens are open to the public. You don't need to come for tea or coffee. You can see 2,000 juniper bushes growing with fully laden berries on them at the moment. So it's here to be physically viewed, not just sort of talked about in any marketing context. Come and see it. See the drying room.
Brilliant.
In fact, we've just put plans into our local council to upgrade the distillery to, I'm going to say it's all singing or dancing, but increase the drying room, make it all glass so people can see it as soon as you come into the distillery. It's a glass frontage, bigger still, more of a visitor centre. But again, all sustainable, like everything, so from solar panels to, as you can imagine. And on the same footprint that we have, but just make it add to that visitor appreciation of what it's really about.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fantastic. I have not forgotten and will not soon forget my trip to see you and to see the garden and to walk the garden with you. Of course, we were all wearing shoes and you were barefoot. That was another story. But it was a treat, and it was a treat to see both the gardens and how you produce the gins. For our listeners, and please, Hamish, correct me if I'm wrong here, but for our listeners, I think normal gin production, producers are taking a neutral grain gin, they're macerating their various botanicals in some sort of a basket, and they rectify that spirit in with the botanicals. After a certain period of time that the spirit has been with the botanicals, it's now sort of infused with those, flavors and compounds and so on and so forth. And it's diluted to around 40% alcohol, chill filtered, put into a bottle, boom, Bob's your uncle. Mm-hmm. But your process of gin production is quite different, because I think you're, not to say that other gin producers don't care about the botanicals they're putting into it, but my gut tells me that you're focusing first and foremost on the botanics, and secondly on the alcohol that's also in the bottle.
Completely.
Yeah. So could you go into that process?
Of course. I probably spent too much time, but it is the number one process is obviously growing the botanics primarily. So there's a couple of things here you need to know. One is that we don't artificially heat anything. We're just growing. I only grow the botanics that grow naturally with us. So if we want a citrus style of gin, you've got your lemon verbena there. I get citrus from lemon verbena. So the first thing is growing the botanics, and secondly, hand harvesting them. Thirdly, putting them in the drying room. Now, once you've got them in the drying room, you'd be like for any other distiller, they'll show you the jars of the dried botanics that they're getting from wherever in the world. We can actually show you the living flesh. What I always say about the neutral grain spirit is it's like a painter being given a blank canvas. You very rarely ever ask the artist what canvas have you used to create your painting, especially any of the sort of masterpieces. And it's like, well, it's the color from the botanics that give you the picture of the gin. And for me, we have a variety of colors and shades that no other gin distiller can possibly even think, especially in Scotland, can even think that actually exist. I've actually given them, I used to advise other distillers before I started up here what botanics they could and couldn't use. So it's bringing colour to the gin, but there's two other things to the gins that we do. Is one, we also make what's called plant distillates, a water plant distillate. I touched on it earlier. So you're absolutely right. You make gin by your rectification and your infusion. Yes, it's like a big tea bag, and you boil up the alcohol and the fumes go through the botanics and they condense, and that is gin, as long as you have over 50% of juniper in there. But we also do separate distillations. And I said to you that alcohol is a fantastic way of extracting certain plant chemicals, and so is water. So water collects all the aromatics. If I was to use fresh rose petals in a gin distillery, you would absolutely steal all that subtlety of flavour, and the alcohol, you'd lose it. You might have a subtle amount. I make you a water distillate on fresh rose petals. It is, it's so concentrated and is the essence. I always call it, it's the essence or the soul of the plant by using that. And then, to add to this, we then use the petals of the actual roses so I'm going to use your damask rose that you've got as an example. The base gin is made up with juniper, angelica, coriander, winter savoury, grown here, easy. The rose, so when you taste that, the rose is coming from fresh rose petals being distilled to give you it's like a rose water. If you carried on distilling that, you would eventually get oil. But just as a water, you add a little bit of that into the gin and that changes it. That's when people have our gin, they go, oh my God, that is just like real roses, or, the lemon, or, I think you've got pink elderflower and jasmine, and that's another story I can tell you about that one. But, you've got fresh rose, and then the colour, well, that colour is coming purely from the flower petals themselves. Just infusing. Once you've made the gin, once you've added your rose distilled waters, the colours come infusing it on the petals, and the fact that the gin then turns pink. So in its state that you would buy it, it's golden, and the reason it turns pink is when you add the tonic or squeeze some fresh lemon in there. It's an anthocyanins that's in the flower petals. And at school they do a thing called red cabbage water as a pH indicator. So red cabbage water is purple, squeeze, lemon juice turns pink. Well, this anthocyanin occurs naturally in quite extremely in the plant kingdom, but there are certain flowers that have lots of it. And I have literally about sort of 16 different flowers that I grow specifically for this anthocyanin. And it's a little bit of fun. And what I always said to people was, open the door to the magic of herbs. And for me, this sort of colour changing thing that happens with the rose is a little bit of fun. It's a little bit of magic that Mother Nature can show you. When you add your tonic to the rose gin, it turns pink. Now, the pink elderflower and jasmine, we do have two very large jasmine hedges. We've got a glass house, the one I talked to you right at the beginning, but obviously all completed and etc. But we've got two huge jasmine bushes there, and you don't need much. So we pick some of the jasmine flowers, you make a fresh distillate from that, and tiny amount. And the same with the elderflower. It's fresh elderflower that's distilled that goes into there. And I'm going to let you into a little secret how we get the colour of that to be pink. There's probably too much information again, but we are using some violet petals and a small amount of rose petals, but mostly these violet petals. And then we're adding a little bit of fresh organic lemon juice to that. And it just turns it that most beautiful pink colour that you've got. And then when you go and drink it and add tonic to it, it will continue to turn even more pink. And that's coming again purely from the flower petals. So when you're making gin, you make gin. So we do that. But then we're also using the actual body of the plant so I always say it's like we're using, 3 parts. We're using the bones like everybody else, the dried bones of the botanics. Well, we're using the dried plants material, but we're also using the body because we're using the actual flesh of the petals in themselves. And then you get to the essence and the soul by the water distillate. So in our gins, you're able to use the whole plant is in this bottle. Not just one part that we're distilling. It is body, soul, and bone. It's the whole thing.
Wow.
Sounds like your own commitment, Hamish. All 3 aspects of the self.
Do you know what? Yes, probably. Actually, in hindsight, if I could be blessed enough to make that as a goal and as an objective for life, then I would love that to be that goal and objective.
Yeah. That's remarkable. Really, really cool. Do you mind if I ask you a question on the business side?
Yeah, of course.
I know there's other people employed for this, but you're clearly a man who's been immersed in spirits and wine for a good while here. And how, as someone who's seen it up close, I'm saying this very poorly. What am I trying to ask? Why have we seen the rise in gin fanaticism that we've seen in the United Kingdom? Has something driven that? Has something been behind that? Why gin?
Am I allowed to say
why not happen?
Yeah, well, I think it's sugar, if I'm going to be honest. The flavoured gins have really driven the new growth, that it's opened up to a new market segment. Obviously, for me, I would never use sugar in any of our products. So it's, sugar, and then sugar making gin liqueurs, which it's debatable whether it is a gin. I mean, not going to go into that. But you've asked me a question. It was these gin liqueurs, these sweet 20% gin liqueurs that people thought they were drinking gin. Before that, it was basically your Gordons and Tanqueray and whatever. It was a very traditional gin market. Then suddenly you open the floodgate to a whole new market segment, and then compound that by making pink gin. Then you've got another huge growth. But bear in mind, what you need to look at is some of the sugar contents on these products. For our gins, I like using I like using a light tonic. Fever Tree is the lightest at 2.1 grams per 100 ml. That's the lowest I can find. I like that. But you'll find that if you had too large of these sweet gins, or even the pink ones from the bigger companies, too large measures, that's you taking your sugar allocation for the day.
Wow.
Yeah.
So to answer it, that's why it's grown. And what I do hope is that, I have been asked to make liqueurs. I won't do it. I made a beautiful honey and violet one for Fortnum & Masons from, they've got rooftop hives in their street in Piccadilly. And I've used some of their honey and our violets to make, and that's the only way I'll add sugar. I've also grown stevia here as well, and I've experimented with stevia to make an Old Tom. Again, no sugar. So I'll never make a rum because I won't use sugar beet. So it's just a small thing that I think we have to be. Everything's balanced. Don't get me wrong. I love my chocolate. I'm not this sort of I won't eat this and whatever. Again, it's balance. But that to answer your question, that's what sort of. And I suppose part of me in the journey, the color changing gin thing. I didn't want that to be this is a color changing gin. No, it changes color for a bit of magic, a little bit of a smile. But it's a gin. It's a proper gin. Juniper led. Yes, we're adding other botanics in a way that's probably not been done before, but it's 100% plant based.
Gotcha. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, I've got a handful of gins that I consider my favorites or my go-tos, and they're all delicious. They're all very good. But one of the things. And I'm not saying this to prop you up. I'm also not saying this to put other gins down. I'm just saying it because it's my perception. My favorite gins, when I taste them and I look for the various flavors, it's almost as if the flavors can be a bit of an approximation of what those flavors should be. It's kind of like going to Google Translate and trying to translate a sentence into another language. You get an approximation of what that means, but the translation isn't perfect. Whereas the gins of yours that I've had, it's the essence. It's inescapable. They are the true flavors. And I'm curious, is that, again, back to some of the technical conversation around the gins, is that due to the water distillation, and if so, how are you incorporating the water distilled botanics into the alcohol distilled botanics?
Yeah, so the alcohol distilled botanics are done in a completely different still. The water distillates, we've got two stills, we're about to have a third one, but we have one still that we keep for the water distillate, so it's just all very clean. And what you're doing is you are adding some of that water distillate, that fresh essence, what I call of the roses, the lemon verbena, for example, the elderflower, the jasmine, into the gin, but in a way that you're only adding a very small amount because it's still a gin, but you want those flavors to be pronounced. I love the way you said it. I think also, it's there in terms of whiskey. Obviously, whiskey are using wood and water and still shapes, etc., to make their nuances and location, obviously. And it's the same with wine. I think wine's probably an even better one to choose for that. You can always tell when you've got a fantastic glass of wine in front of you. There's a truth to it. There's in France, I suppose they call it terroir, but there's also been real true to the grapes. You put your nose to one that's had sulfur and everything else, too much, it doesn't hit. For me, it's about purity and clarity. And if our gins, when you drink them, I think that's what makes me smile so, is that people get them and it's this sort of, wow, I didn't know you could do that. And it's that exactly that sort of wow factor that I love, and that you can sit back with it and, no, this is going to sound, but you can actually befriend it. Obviously, alcohol's a balance, we all know that. But, there is a balance to be had to sit back and just think, oh, do you know what? This is what I need. And I love gin. I also love whiskey. Don't get me wrong. I've spent my life, but funny enough, I'm a blended whiskey drinker, like my father was.
Okay.
So I'm glad you feel that, because that really is what it is about to me.
Yeah, I definitely do, and it makes me, and of course our listeners know this because we will tell them in the intro to this podcast that, being with Impact's Beverages, I have been excited to finally start bringing these gins in after visiting with you. Christ, it seems like ages ago now. But it was only two.
Yeah, it feels like that.
I mean, yeah, I know. Thank you, 2020. But yeah, it's something that I'm so very much looking forward to. Quick question for you: what was the first gin that you created? And do you have a favorite amongst your line?
Well, yes and yes. First, obviously, Apothecary Rose was the one that blazed the way for me, because I wouldn't, as I said to you, I wouldn't be here without that. So the Apothecary Rose is the starter. We also do a Christmas gin, and we do a wild gin, which is very close to my heart, which I hadn't made when you came over, by the way. I don't know whether you've tried it or where we are with that. But in fact, actually, there's so many wild plants there that might not pass your FDA plant database. Actually, I'm sure they wouldn't. So it's a bit like having 5 kids. You don't have favourites. However, there is one I always stretch out to have a drink. And I love the floral, but there's a gin I can have. That sort of time. It's to be polite would be like, say 6 o'clock is a drink time, but actually, pretty much after I'm finished this, I will have a drink. The Lemon Verbena is a drink that I love having, the Lemon Verbena gin, because I don't need to think. I suppose that's why I love blended whiskey, is I don't have to analyse, think. It's like, oh, please, just give me a hit of this. And it's like an old friend. And so that lemon verbena to me, and we grow a lot of lemon verbena, and I've grown it for herbal teas for, since day one. It's been one of my favourite plants. I've got to stop saying that because I say that about so many plants. But I suppose it's that sort of stretch out. And then if I want to, I suppose in summer, I do need to think about let the rose and, the elderflower and things all do. You can't not let them overtake the thought process because they're there. So your brain is having to connect with what's your palate's been given, because there are so many, your palate's picking up so many flavors. It's like, oh, okay, hang on, what's going on here? Whereas the lemon verbena, that's my shot. It's like, yes, please, just give me ice, lemon, long tonic, boom. And I'm happy in the snow as we are today on the height of summer with one of those. And yeah, as I said, not allowed favourites, but there is one I like to put my hand out to get. I was going to say any time, but I'll be polite. After 5, probably.
You're among friends, Hamish.
I think that's such an important point. Jason and I have had this conversation, between ourselves, but also with many of our podcast guests, and more specifically over the course of 2020, where it seems more often than not, what we reach for is what's giving us comfort, what we need for comfort. And I know myself, when my day is done, I don't want to use my brain anymore in the places where I don't need to be using my brain. And so I'll just find that really good, comforting whiskey. I don't need to think about it. I just need to know I enjoy it. And then take a breath.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, my old man used to make Johnny Walker Black. When we had in Rarity, we had our own blend, and Dad gave the original formula for that, and so we based our blend on the original Johnny Walker Black, which was prior to being a 12-year-old. It was unlabelled. It was only becoming a 12-year-old when Chivas Regal brought out theirs as a 12 to compete. But you find a good blended whiskey or a good gin, a good gin that you can just sort of think, oh, just come on. It's exactly that. And I think it's a really lovely way of putting it, just to be comforted that, we're living in pretty bizarre times at the moment. And so old friends are best.
Yeah, indeed. It's also hard not to start drinking at 10 a.m. every day.
Hey, Jason, did you have any further questions for the good Hamish? Did you want to ask our closing questions? I didn't want to cut you off.
I was just prepping for that. Yeah, with an eye on wrapping this up, taking up time from everybody here, and Hamish, you've got to get onto your afternoon gin here.
Yeah, I do.
So we're closing in on that, and so we like to get out of here with a similar question for everybody, and it's taking on a more pressing. More pressing need in these pandemic times. But as you cast your eye to the future, clearly you're talking about the expansion of your distillery. As you look through 2021, and we all hope for an end to pandemic living, but even 21, even into 22, what's something that's got you excited? What has your eye as you peek into the future?
So here's the deal. I am the worst person in the world to look at macroeconomics or the macro world of things. I haven't read a newspaper in maybe 20 years. I don't watch telly unless it's a film. Obviously, I'm aware of what's going on, family and everything else. On a macro level, I hope we wake up to the realization of how we need to start treating the earth. How we need to start having a deep respect and working with that. And we haven't got much time. And I know there's lots of arguments. I'm not going to go into any of that. All I can say is that each and every one of us need, in my opinion, only my opinion, need to have a connectivity to Mother Earth. Once you have that connectivity, you'll do everything you can to help protect her. And I think maybe the one thing of the pandemic is people have realized that actually she is there for us. We've just been running around too fast to miss that. And so I think that's a big up. I think there's a big positive that people are going to realize I don't need to fly off to X, Y, and Z, and put a whole load of fuel in. Why have they gone and put so much plastic on this? What are we doing? So, I'm hoping that will come to the fore. And in my own funny little way, teaching gardeners and plants people how to plant and work with plants I work with 3 charities here. So we've always got 2 people here from, we've got a naval Scotch, it doesn't matter, but I'm always getting people to get their hands in there, to taking people around the garden to say, look, we can do this. So on a bigger picture, I'm hoping that we understand how fragile and how much support we need to give her. In the long run, anyway, we'll do our course. On the short term, what I look forward to now, you won't believe me, but across my garden, I'm looking at, I had to get planning permission for it, if you can believe it. I will be moving my office to a huge tree house.
I love this.
Underneath my tree house will be the aviary for my owl, with a hatch where she can just come up and down to my office. At the moment, she's in my office, as you know now, and she sleeps here, and she has the whole freedom of the house to fly around with. But I cannot wait to have, and the treehouse has been built with no bolts, no metal, no glue. We have the most beautiful man here who works with carpentry, but in a very natural way. So it's 3 meters up, and I think my wife's petrified she'll never see me again if once that's up. So I'm looking forward to the treehouse. Yes, I'm looking forward to building a new distillery, but I'm also looking forward to, we've got 2 wetlands areas that we want to cultivate again to get more wildlife attracted to this area. So on the macro and micro, macro as mentioned, let us all touch her. And on a micro, can't wait to be in my treehouse.
Absolutely love it.
Wow, those are both fantastic. And in listening to you and in listening to the plans, my wife is a wildlife ecologist, and we actually have wild areas in our back garden. We only have a half acre, but we are working on wildlife habitat and organic gardening. And I can just imagine my wife coming to visit you and just staying. And then my kid, my eldest kid, had just turned 14 yesterday, is very much into carpentry. And I listened to you saying, we've got a local guy who does these beautiful, carpentry. And that's what I'd love to see my kid move into as well, using his hands. So, gosh, I could bring my whole family, and they might, never leave you, Hamish.
Well, the idea is to bring the whole family here. Do you know, it doesn't matter if you're 99 being pushed in a wheelchair and taking the scent of a sweet pea to remind you of your youth and bring tears to you, or if you're a mother breastfeeding, or you're bringing teenage kids. That is the key, and for this space in its own little way to be able to communicate that. And, I'm hoping one day, I get to come back over to America to help with the gin and help, spread the message further. But it's exactly what you're doing. It's turning over our gardens to invite nature into our lives. And actually, it's the most freeing thing, because you don't have to control. You just let it happen naturally. It's the easiest way of gardening. Anyway, quite right. You'd love it. Can't wait to show you.
Awesome. Yeah, we will be there. Thanks ever so much, Hamish. What a treat speaking to you today and learning more about it. Joshua was raving about the potential for this interview and saying you'll just love Hamish, and you'll thoroughly enjoy listening to him and his passion and his energy, and you've lived up to the advanced billing, Hamish. It's been an absolute joy.
No, well, I've really loved it. I have to sometimes be careful that I don't get too carried away. And that was me trying to be careful not to get too carried away.
Well, you're talking to two guys who get carried away in their whiskey tastings all the time. So
brilliant.
I really mean it when I say you're among friends.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. Thank you.
Once again, thanks to Hamish for his time and his wonderful, wonderful company. But thanks to you for bringing this to us as One Nation Under Whisky, and me as co-host, and on behalf of our listeners as well. That's the type of chap that we all need to be listening to and finding a way to support. And I don't just mean that by buying his gin. I mean supporting his philosophies.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Because some people might listen to that and think, oh, here's a hippy dippy guy. Listen, it doesn't hurt you to be kinder to the earth. It doesn't hurt you to pick up after yourself. It doesn't hurt you to, if you're hiking and you see a bit of garbage on the trail, to pick it up, right? I mean, these are all little things that we could be doing just to look after your local surroundings, right? And I think that in the end is really a takeaway that one can have.
Yeah, when you and I concluded that interview, and Hamish had shut down his screen and had gone, and you just looked at me over the Zoom and you said, wasn't that great? And I just, I'm sure I still had, deer in headlights look on my face after just being amazed for the full duration and just being like, yeah, that was good.
It was really good. And one of the things one of my takeaways, now granted, I'm more familiar with Hamish and with his garden and with the gins than you were, but what I wasn't familiar with was his deep familial connection to Scotch whiskey in the Scotch whiskey industry, right? Mm-hmm. His dad helping to start the Keepers of the Quaich, right? And him starting that program at Harriet Watt, and of course Inverarity blends, and there were some single malts bottled under that label as well that he told me about a while ago. But I didn't know how deep that connection had been. So it was really cool to hear that he does come in part to this from a whiskey background, or from, whiskey has in some ways informed his approach to creating these spirits.
Yep. I really meant it when I said it in the interview. I cannot wait to get back to Scotland for a host of reasons. and getting to actually meet Hamish face to face, wander in the garden with him, drink a cup of tea, see the new build on the distillery. It's going to be brilliant.
Yep.
Cannot wait for that.
Yep, he's in our future.
And likely have another episode around it. You know, I'm sure he'll resonate with our listeners, and I'm sure having a follow-up somewhere in 2022 is not beyond the bounds of imagination.
Agreed. So, the interesting thing about this episode, at least the timing of this episode, is we don't really have any news to be breaking. We also don't have any new emails to be sharing, but we did receive something in the mail, and I wanted to bring that to our listeners' attention. You already know about it. In fact, I'm going to be sending one of these off to you.
Ooh.
And our listeners will know what I'm talking about in a second. We received a package in the mail from a dear listener, David Feldner. He's also a very dear Single Cast Nation member. And so, I visit the post office about once a week. I check our mailboxes, see if we have any checks coming in, or if we have any invoices that have come in, and so on and so forth. And I checked my P.O. box, and there was one of the yellow cards in there, which tells you received a package that's a bit too big for the size of your P.O. box.
Oh,
that always gets me
That's a good start. Yeah, it's always the size of the P.O. box with you.
And so I was excited. So I delivered my little yellow card to the post office worker. The post office worker gave me a box that I want to say was around, 5 by 5 by 5 inches, a cube, if you will. So I opened the box, and inside the box was a little note and these wooden, it almost looked like a coconut cut in half. And the outside, right, the convex side of the coconut shell was, burned or branded in some way with some really nice patterns in it. And then these almost like wicker rings that came along with it. So okay, let's read the note. And so the note read, Jason,
I like the fact that the note was on top and you just went, I'll just bypass that. Let's see what's in here.
Isn't it terrible, right? It goes back to being a kid, right? And it's your birthday and you get a card.
Birthday card, boo.
You open the card. Where's the check? Where's the money? Okay. Oh, they also wrote something that I meant to read. Right. Okay.
Your mom is busy reading the card over your shoulder. That was me just squeezing out a little cork here. If that was picked up on audio, I'm just replenishing. Because I don't learn my lessons, I've been enjoying a little bit of Kilchoman during our recording today. This is the Fino Sherry Matured Release, one of 10,500 bottles in 2020, and 46% alcohol. Just an easy go-to Kilchoman that I hear that your hot mic is picking that up too.
Well, yeah, it's no longer Passover, so I can drink whiskey, and I decided to pour the same with you. Is this because you usually observe? You have a Jewish household, right? Mm-hmm, you usually observe, even though you yourself are not Jewish, you like to observe the holidays. Did you keep? And we will get to David's letter here, but I want to talk about this for a second. Did you keep kosher for Passover from a no drinking whiskey perspective? And if so,
I did indeed.
You did? Was this your break fast? Your break whiskey fast whiskey? Look at that.
It is indeed. It is indeed, and I have thoroughly enjoyed it. Yeah, today we were Jews on Easter today. We drove from our house. We live about 15, 20 minutes from the Costco. And we drove into Costco, and the car park is completely empty. And we just looked at each other in the car, and we were like, it's Easter Sunday. Costco is closed on Easter Sunday.
Yep.
And we all looked at ourselves, and we said, Jews on Easter. Both my boys totally dug it.
I did the same thing. Oh my gosh. Earlier, Delma said, Dad, do you know how to make paninis? And I said, of course I know how to make paninis. Can you make me one now? I said, first off, I don't have time, and we don't have any bread. She said, can you make them later? I said, no problem. We'll have it for dinner. So when I was done with whatever I was doing, I hopped in my car. I headed to the store. I was going to get bread and fresh moots and pesto, and wouldn't you know it, it's Easter.
Yeah, Tamara was busy texting me that we were going to pick up a new lawnmower battery from Lowe's. She was going to order it online. I was going to swing by and do curbside. And she texted me and said, Lowe's is closed for Easter. And I was like, that's ridiculous. No, it's not.
What?
It's a weekend in the spring. Like, people want to be in their gardens. Why would Lowe's be closed? Lowe's was closed for Easter. And then we pulled into the Costco parking lot. And Costco was closed for Easter. Easter's like a real thing. It's like a big deal.
It is.
I was raised with Easter, but I was also raised in the UK. And I know that this is a 4-day weekend in the UK. And I know that, you know, on Easter Sunday, you're probably still going to be able to go to the supermarket for some portion of the day. Full closure? Like, we already had a holiday Friday, there's a holiday Monday, Sunday. Come on. That's pushing it.
It's a big deal, Jason. I mean, Easter and Christmas, those are the big, right? Those are your signposts for Christianity. Those are the two biggest days.
That's what I told the boys today. I was like, these are the high holidays for Christians.
Exactly. Yep.
And so, final comment, and then we'll get back to David Feldner's note. But every Easter I think of this. When I was 14, 15, my mum bought me a box of Cadbury's cream eggs.
Oh, yes.
And there must have been 48 maybe cream eggs in the box. And I finished it in a week.
Wow. So hold on.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Yeah.
I'm gonna breaking out the calendar. So 48 you said?
Taking off his socks here. Yeah, he's taking off his socks.
So you ate 6.857142 Cadbury cream eggs per day.
But never more than that.
I tell you, Paul Newman had nothing on you in Left Hand Luke.
Left Hand Luke? Cool Hand Luke?
Cool Hand Luke. Cool. Did I say Left Hand Luke? I meant Cool Hand
Okay,
Luke.
Dad. Okay, Dad. Thanks, Dad. So yeah, every Easter I think about those 48 Cadbury's cream eggs. And I look at my kids, and today my 14-year-old was hanging out with friends as part of the Jewish social group at synagogue. And they had a bunch of snacks, and he ate 4 donuts. And I was like, 4 donuts? And then I stopped myself because it's my annual remembering of eating almost 7 Cadbury cream eggs a day for a week. So I don't think I've really got a leg to stand on. Anyway, so back to David and his brief missive.
That's right.
Which you had eschewed.
I had eschewed, but I'm going to unshoe it. I'm going to reshoe it. Anyway.
Left shoe it.
Left shoe it.
Cool shoe it.
Cool shoe it. Cool shoe Luke. Got it. Cool shoe Feldner.
Yep. Cool left shoe.
Cool. Joshua and Jason. These are jicaras. And I'm going to spell that for people. Jicaras. Jicaras. Handmade by artisans.
Why does it sound Japanese when you say it? I'm just waiting on Hikara-san. Hikara-san.
Okay, I'm going to move on because you're getting real racist real fast. These are jicaras, handmade by artisans from Oaxaca, Mexico. These traditional hand-carved gourds, so they're gourds, they're not coconut shells, gourds, are used all around the region to share and enjoy the unique, complex characters of mezcal. They're definitely the proper barware for sipping and drinking mezcal neat, while holding in the aromas and actually stealing a little bit of your mezcal. The ring, right? The ring, remember I mentioned that sort of wicker ring thing? is a plant fiber base. So you actually sit the hikara on that wicker ring. And it just says, I hope you guys enjoy. David Feldner.
So cool. So very, very cool. I've been okay drinking my mezcal from an espresso cup, but I know it's not accurate or traditional. And so,
I'm so
Is there
glad.
a PS?
Yeah.
Does he mention this?
I'm so glad you brought that up because, I reached out to David and, to thank him. And I wanted
thank him, of course.
And I wanted to make sure that he was comfortable me announcing this. I didn't want to announce it without his approval. And so I sent a picture and I said, "Jeepers, this is so generous of you," because it is incredibly generous. And he says, "You guys got me thinking about proper drinking vessels, and I didn't think the espresso cup was the correct one for mezcal." So he goes on, he says, "So when I found them, I thought I'd share." There you go.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
That's very, very much appreciated. And as people who like to drink our whiskey from the right glass, arguably our rum from the right glass, but now to have the correct vessel for the mezcal, I'm just going to enjoy it even more.
And what I'm going to do is I'm going to post a picture of the hikaras on our Facebook page, both Single Cask Nation and One Nation Under Whiskey Facebook page. When you see these things, you wouldn't think that these are proper drinking vessels because they're so wide open, right? When we think of these 40% alcohol and above spirits, we say, okay, that's got to go into a Glencairn or a tulip-shaped glass because you want to focus those aromas. And this is doing the opposite. It's totally opening it up.
That's why I've been using the espresso cup, is because it's a small enough vessel to pour into, but it's then open, and the nose is allowed to just escape, to not become focused. See, I don't know if you've done it yet, absolutely take this new drinking vessel that you have for mezcal and pour the same mezcal into it and into our spade round glass or into a Glencairn. Different experiences. Completely different experiences. That's why I've been using the espresso cup, because it's the only vessel I've got that's small yet open.
And so you believe the experience of mezcal in your espresso cup and then soon the hikara will be the truer drinking experience?
Correct.
Interesting. So you feel as if I'm potentially, or anyone, is potentially missing out on things by not having mezcal in a proper drinking vessel.
Oh, 100%. And it's not just me. I was at a mezcal tasting with the mixing glass. Gabby had arranged one, and it was the chap from Recambero. And, the first thing they were saying was, if you're coming to us from the whiskey side of things, just like you said a moment ago, you're used to focusing aromas. Here we want to relax with the aromas. And the actual, the traditional clay vessel out of Oaxaca is just flat and wide open. It's almost like a raised sided saucer. If you ever put your cup in a saucer.
Oh, yeah.
It's almost like that. And so it is this opening, this softening of borders, you might say, to enhance the experience of enjoying another culture.
That is absolutely lovely. Cool. Yeah, I haven't tried mine yet. For some reason, I've been waiting to when I can send you yours, and then we can enjoy it together and do the and actually I'd like to do that. I'd like to do the side by side with you. So.
Oh, indeed we shall. Let's roll it into One Nation Under Whiskey for one of these end segments.
Beautiful. So we've pretty much reached the end of the podcast, but I want to say a couple of things.
Are we going to let people know how they too could send us something special?
And that's what I was going to say, Jason. Firstly, David, this was beyond generous. You didn't need to send us these hikaras. It is so lovely receiving that, and we thank you. We thank Travis. Travis previously had sent us some glasses and a Glencairn holder, and people have sent us postcards and have come to the Jubilee gifting us bottles, and of course Vadim, with his Glencairn toppers. People are so incredibly generous, and I want to thank David, yourself, and anybody else who sent us notes and gifts and so on and so forth. And so if you want to send us a handwritten letter or a note or a postcard, or if you want to gift us something.
I like your use of handwritten letter. Like, you could also use a typewriter, a stenograph.
Nope, handwritten. Only handwritten.
I've seen both of our chicken scratchies. We should not be imploring anybody to handwrite letters to us.
You can send us whatever you want to send us. Hopefully just nice things, please. To P.O. Box 335, and that's in Guilford, Connecticut, Guilford. CT is the state code, 06437. And if you don't want to send us anything, a letter or whatever, you can always email us, right? Because we love receiving emails. And you could reach out to us, questions@onenationunderwhiskey.com. Yes, Jason, you've got a surprised look on your face or something?
That's not my surprised look. Just as you mentioned this, it's not an email that we would have turned into a question for the episode, but it was a thank you from dear James Foster when we covered his tariff question email on a previous episode. James writes, "Thanks for addressing my question so thoroughly! ! And for the kind words. I miss being with you guys, including the Queen of the Boxies." And Jess Lomas is most definitely the Queen of the Boxies. "Kudos to Joshua for getting the hidden TTB reference. Good on ya, mate. By the way, the word that cracks me up every time I hear it is unique. I think of a dad joke. How do you catch a wild rabbit?"
Unique up on it.
How do you catch a tame rabbit?
Oh, that one I don't know. How do you catch a tame rabbit?
Tame way. Unique up on it. It's so funny reading that out loud. I felt like I needed to blow my nose. And this is allergy season for me. So I'm used to my nose running, then being blocked, and then running, and then being blocked. So tame way, unique up on it actually gave me a visceral reaction in the old olfactory system. So that's brilliant. That was good to hear from James as well. That's always a pleasure.
Yeah, it is.
So many good people.
I miss him. Yeah, the last time I think I saw him was at Jubilee, Seattle.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, 2017-ish, maybe 2018. Anyway, so thank you, James, for thanking us for reading your email. But it was nice hearing from him. And so if, like James, you want to reach out to us, again, questions@onenationunderwhiskey.com. You can always find us on Facebook. Just search One Nation Under Whiskey. We have a page. We have a group. You can post questions there. Twitter, we're at One Nation Whiskey, and in Instagram we are at One Nation Under Whiskey. And Jason, if you had to choose between having the word whiskey with an E or without an E, and then incorporating that spelling into everything that we do, which spelling would it be?
No question. No question. No E. As we say in Scotland, get to fuck. I was talking to the E. I wasn't talking to you. I wasn't talking to our listeners. I was talking to the E. E.
Get to fuck.
Get to.
How do you spell get to fuck?
Well, you could go with a GET and then a space and then a TAE. Or you could combine it and just make it a GETTAE. Get to.
And you don't even have to say fuck at that point. You just say get to.
We do.
Right?
We just say get to.
What's more impactful?
Those in the know.
Jason, it has been absolutely lovely spending time with you.
It's been a delightful Easter Sunday together, dramming on Cologne and talking about Hamish and remembering good times.
Well, I look forward to seeing you again when we record for Extra Extra. And we have a few other interviews in the hopper for future episodes of One Nation Under Whiskey I'm very excited about. I'm not going to say anything about that. Just know that I am excited about it, as I know you are as excited about it as I am, Jason. Do you have any final words before we bid our listeners adieu?
We had an absolute blast watching Back to the Future for the most recent episode of Mates, Movies and Malts with Mark Watt. It was a quadruple M that day.
It was a quadruple M, yes. Oh, that was so brilliant. Yeah, so for those of you that don't know, we have a third podcast called Mates, Movies and Malts, where we invite an industry friend to sit and watch a movie with us, and you, the listeners, get to enjoy the movie along with us. If you're interested in that podcast, it is a Patreon. In other words, you do have to pay for it. But the first episode is free. You could just do a search for Mates, Movies, and Malts. And the first episode is just you and me, and we're watching Raiders of the Lost Ark. But we had Jess Lomas on to watch The Goonies. We had Ian Allen on to watch Blade Runner, Billy Abbott to watch Batman, and then just now, Mark Watt with Back to the Future. And man, has that been a ton of fun.
Yeah, as always, listeners will remember the Mark Watt malt stock episode where he had done his research to be able to get the knife in. Boy, did he do his research for that Back to the Future viewing as well. That was really tremendous. So yeah, those are my closing words. Go search out Mates, Movies and Malts with these two jamokes plus friend.
Beautiful. On that note, Jason, it's been a time. Cheers.
Get to.
You're still not talking to me, right? Who are you talking to when you say get to?
Anyone who'll listen.
Cheers.
Cheers. Wake up the gimp.
Where's Zed, baby? No, where's Zed? Zed, baby. Zed.
I can't believe you allowed that quote to go by without saying the gimp's sleeping. I can't believe you allowed that quote to go by without that response. This is call and response 101.
I know. It's because I couldn't remember the line. I know. Listen, if I can't be anything if I'm not honest, Jason. I forgot the line.
If I wasn't worried about you before, I'm worried about you now.
I just have homework to do, Jason. That's all it is.
That's all. That's all. This has never happened to me before. It's okay, Joshua. This happens to other guys at some point in their life. It happens.
But if it happens for more than 4 hours, then I will see a doctor about it.